Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this online discourse. This is Furqan, and I have the honor of moderating this webinar today. On behalf of South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, I welcome you all to this timely and crucial discourse on combating hate speech, the role of social media in promoting or undermining tolerance for minority groups. As we approach the celebration of International Day for Tolerance on November 16th, 2024, we have organized this webinar especially for this regard to discuss one of the most pressing issues that our world is facing today, which is hate speech and its disproportionate impact on minority groups. It has been almost 3 decades since UNESCO's Declaration of Principle of Tolerance was adopted, yet the challenges of hate speech, particularly through the digital platforms and social media, has only intensified. This presents critical questions about the responsibilities of the states, social media platforms in combating this growing menace. In a recent report, hello, Dr. Fernand, we're joined by Dr. Fernand, who I will be referring some of the excerpts of his report of HRC 4657 on hate speech, targeting minorities in social media. A former special rapporteur of UN minority issues, Dr. Fernand De Varennes, underscored some of the key concerns in that report. He noted that while international law allows for restriction on freedom of expression in specific cases, such as when speech incites violence or genocide against minorities, many states are not fully addressing these obligations in practice. This raises an important question, which is like, how can the states ensure that the legal frameworks their legal frameworks effectively protect minorities while respecting freedom of expression? Since we are discussing the hate speech and its spread in social media platforms, the report also highlights the role of social media platforms, which, despite policies to curb hate speech, remain largely ineffective due to algorithms that can amplify hate, radicalization, and violence. In fact, the report claims hate-based minorities suffer. This leads to another important question, which is how can social media platforms be held accountable for the harm they cause, especially given the vast influence of their algorithms and artificial intelligence on users' behavior. As I said, we are truly privileged to have Dr. Fernand De Varennes, former special UN rapporteur on minority issues, with us today, along with the esteemed panel of experts to discuss these critical issues. We will explore how social media can either promote or undermine tolerance for minority groups, and what actionable steps can be taken to protect vulnerable populations online. Lubna Jerar is also joining us for the first time on SARIM's platform, although I have the privilege and honor of working with her on many initiatives, as I consider her as a mentor as well. She is the secretary of Union of Journalists, Karachi Union of Journalists, and she also represents International Federation of Journalists as their gender coordinator from Pakistan. We have Ms. Sulochana Ramiah Mohan. She is the independent journalist and also the deputy editor of Ceylon today. But last but not the least, we have young and exuberant, I would say, the speaker, Ms. Bridhika Senchury. She is the co-founder of Dalit Lives Matter Global Alliance. So without further ado, I've already taken up a lot of your time. So today we will engage in a comprehensive discussion on these critical issues and questions and the future of combating hate speech in this digital planet. So Dr. Fernand, I would request you to take the floor and start proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. First, I'd like to apologize for being late, and I do want to extend my deep felt appreciation to SARIM, the South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, for inviting me. So I'm delighted and honored to be part of your online event on hate speech and its impact on minority communities in the region. So let me start by saying, of course, that social media can do both. And by that, I mean promote, but also at the same time undermine tolerance for minorities. And I'd like to share with you that I remember a few decades ago that at the United Nations, one of my predecessors organized an event where there was a discussion and a high-level panel, as a matter of fact, just looking at the internet and social media, where it was discussed that these were powerful potential forces for good, really, because they could more easily bring together minorities across borders, across the world, lead to more exchange of documents and information, including in minority languages. And in fact, it could make more easily more easier, rather, exchanges between different communities and individuals of different groups and so on. Now, while many of these examples did and continue to happen, and while it's true that they all represent possible means for increasing knowledge and understanding of our neighbors who are different, perhaps in terms of ethnicity, language, or religion, and it can help perhaps surmount intolerance, or it could increase tolerance of and understanding of these differences, I do not think there would be many today who would disagree that on balance, social media has been very destructive and dangerous than we even thought could be possible 20 years ago. Quite frankly, I think 20 years ago, we were naive. We were looking at social media and the internet as wonderful tools and how this would actually encourage inclusive and greater dialogue. So I would like to briefly present perhaps a more global perspective of what we're facing in terms of hate speech and minorities in social media before addressing a bit more the issue in South Asia to some extent. Others will be able to do this much better than I will. Just a few years ago, in my 2021 thematic report to the United Nations Human Rights Council on hate speech in social media and minorities, I actually issued a warning that the international community was failing to tackle hate speech, and that minorities themselves, specifically, if we talk about ethnic, religious, or linguistic minorities, minorities themselves were facing a tsunami of hate and xenophobia. I just even described it as a pandemic of the mind at the time. And it was also seen that it was necessary, I presented my report, a proposal that the United Nations initiate a global process to regulate in a legally binding treaty what is a global phenomenon. We cannot talk about hate speech in social media as only an internal matter inside a country. It's actually a global challenge and, in fact, problem. And the global phenomenon is really that with social media, and you've referred to it earlier, Furqan, that we are seeing a fanning of the flames of hate. And social media, it can now funnel all of this and almost instantaneously reach millions of people every day. And this is a huge challenge and difficulty. My proposal is that we needed a treaty that would provide guidance, clarity, and consistency by being, first of all, or presenting a human rights approach that would have two central pillars. That, on the one hand, it would try to ensure the proper understanding and protection of freedom of expression, which is always the fundamental value in international human rights law. But also, at the same time, the other pillar would focus on those who appear to be overwhelmingly the main victims. And there are about 3/4 of all targets of hate speech are, by the way, in social media are minorities, and that the measures had to be taken to protect them specifically. To add perhaps another element, social media platform owners, and I have to remind you that this is perhaps particularly the case of X, formerly known as Twitter. They do not self-regulate, or they do it in a way that really doesn't harm their own interests first. And in fact, in recent years, once again, in relation to X, formerly Twitter, what we've seen is a weakening of previous guardrails that existed against hate speech. Because, well, it's actually more to actually, and it's hate sells. Hate actually can attract attention, get clicks, and so on. And so we are seeing a weakening of guardrails in some of the social media, the largest platforms, for the reasons that hate is profitable, but also in some cases because of the influence of powerful and more nationalistic governments. We can see that in India, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, and others, that nationalism, majoritarian nationalism, actually is fueling, in part, the proliferation, the funneling, the flaming, the fanning of hatred in this media. But you also have, and the treaty that I proposed, or the proposal towards a treaty, actually indicates there has to be consequences to the harm actually caused. And it is necessarily to address, therefore, in creating obligations and consequences for those social media that do not actually protect the most vulnerable to the harms caused by words that can lead to real life harm. So the promises of respecting the human rights norms and values that were made in many of the social media platforms a number of years ago have easily been forgotten when the 3 Ps are involved. 3 Ps: profits, power, and politics. So those who have paid the price are invariably the more vulnerable, marginalized, and likely to be scapegoated. And if you haven't figured it out yet, unfortunately, it's almost always minorities. So one of the main messages of my report is that we are failing to sufficiently address and acknowledge that minorities are overwhelmingly the victims of hate and incitement to violence and discrimination. It's anti-Semitism It's Islamophobia. It's anti-Gypsyism. It's the vitriol, the hate against Afro-Americans, against Asians, Latinos, Dalits, against Roma in Europe, against Christians and other religious minorities, especially in, I have to say, in your region, it seems. Again, unfortunately, the United Nations and those who deal with social media, including sometimes countries who are favorable to tackle hate speech globally, well, largely they're failing in their endeavors because they're not actually naming and tackling specifically the evil where the evil actually most occurs. And that's in relation to minorities. And just to give you one quick example, many of you will be familiar with the UN Strategy and Plan of Action and Guidance on Combating Hate Speech. It really does not recognize clearly anywhere in the document that minorities are overwhelmingly, and I have to repeat this, minorities are overwhelmingly the targets of hate speech. Around 3/4 of all hate speech that we can identify on social media actually targets minorities. But the UN Strategy, Plan of Action, and Guidance document doesn't actually admit this, recognize it. And most of the efforts that it identifies to combat hate speech does not actually focus where most hate speech occurs. The need to protect minorities, and specifically against hate speech, and even dehumanizing, encouraging genocide, in fact, against minorities in some cases. So perhaps one of the key messages here is that that's a failure. If you don't focus on those who are overwhelmingly targeted and vulnerable, how can you actually address and try to prevent hate speech? Not focusing on the main targets of hate speech, which means against minorities, also means ignoring that the severest forms of hate speech can lead to the worst instances of violence, atrocities, and even genocide. So I also warn that hate speech faced by minorities is also qualitatively different from most other forms of hate in social media because of what I just mentioned earlier. The harm and violence that it may lead to are far worse in the case of minorities than most other targets. Once again, if we needed to be reminded, the Holocaust, as is the case of almost all modern genocides around the world, did not start with gas chambers. It started with hate speech against a minority. And unfortunately, and I may sound pessimistic, but I must say I think we need to get our act together at the international level. That's the direction that we're heading now. And if I expand South Asia a bit and include Myanmar, we have an almost perfect example of how for a significant period of time, vitriol and hate spewed through Facebook against, and other social media, against the Rohingya minority. And essentially it was left unchecked, using dehumanizing language, reducing members of that minority to words, and I won't use all of the words used, but the Rohingya would describe as dangerous pests, reducing members of that minority to almost subhuman level, non-human level. And in a sense, quite clearly, and there are studies that show this, it normalized social media, normalized violence against that minority, and made their persecution and their forced removal from the country in their hundreds of thousands because of fear of their own lives and safety normal. And it actually normalized violence and made it possible to have situations where their homes were burnt, members of the Rohingya minority were tortured, killed, women and girls from that minority were raped and raped. So evil in that case was left to actually occupy social media almost quite freely for a number of years in Myanmar. And in that case, we did not name the evil soon enough or took measures strong enough in social media to protect the Rohingya minority. Could it happen again in South Asia? Some would say that it has already started. And here civil society organizations are playing a key role because governments in South Asia appear reluctant, I should say, too often to try, for example, to gather disaggregated data on how hate speech targets minorities. You have some organizations, including your own, but there are others such as the South Asia Collective, Avaz, and the Equality Labs that have tried to fill the gap. And the data that they've been collected, the image they show is truly deeply troubling. And I mentioned it in my report. The amount of hate speech going through Facebook and other social media is incredible. In Assam, India, for example, Avaz pointed out that in one study, they had found 800 posts on Facebook. Almost all of this hate speech targeted Bengali, people of Bengali background, where they were openly referred to as criminals, rapists, terrorists, pigs, and other terms. And these were shared almost 100,000 times, adding up to around more than 5 million views of violent hate speech. And that's just one example of one study that shows us the extent of the problem. And the information I had received a few years ago in preparation of my report suggests that the same phenomenon is occurring in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and others, especially India, as a matter of fact, mainly and overwhelmingly targeting religious and other minorities. Now, Others here on this distinguished panel will certainly and more knowledgeably refer to what has been occurring in countries of the region, including Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and others, and India. I apologize perhaps for focusing so much on social media as mainly undermining tolerance for minorities rather than promoting it. But I am afraid that that seems to be the reality. And not only in South Asia, as I said, but even in the United States. Those of you who were looking at, if you follow the recent United States presidential elections, you will notice that during the elections, there was a lot of hate speech or language which was certainly derogatory, targeting minorities. And that's why I'd like to finish by reminding all of us that evil has to be named, and it is evil that social media profit from hate. Essentially, as was mentioned earlier, as a result of the algorithms that they use in their business models, which, by the way, these social platforms, these social media platforms, are among the most profitable private enterprises in the world today. And there are almost little or no financial liability or responsibility. That's beginning to change slightly in Europe, in some countries in Europe in particular, but not sufficiently, quite frankly. So this has to be addressed head on. No private business should be immune from for the harm and violence and destruction that they can directly contribute to. And as we've been clearly seeing in India, Pakistan, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, and others. And so that is why I've tried and kept on emphasizing a global regulatory approach to address this global anomaly, in fact, this lack of responsibility for harm caused. Social media, well, they must be encouraged and assisted in voluntarily fully integrating international human rights standards, but quite frankly, they don't do it anymore, not sufficiently. And in fact, they're perhaps doing it less today than they did 5 years ago. I could say a lot more, but I have to leave time for others who actually know the situation in your region much better than I do. And I would therefore give the floor to make sure that we can understand better the context and the complexities of hate speech in social media in South Asia. Merci beaucoup, shukran, manana, dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fernand, for setting the tone for this entire discourse. And you've rightly pointed out the non-seriousness approach of the social media owners for self-regulation, the reluctance of self-regulation. And you've categorically highlighted the 3 P's of politics, power, and profits that incorporated in the social media. And at last, you've said that algorithms of media, social media, used are much more towards, let's say, extracting a lot of financial benefits for their owners. So that is why, and you also said that it has to be understood and it has to be meant that identifying the evil is the main reason, and then moving forward for their solutions or resolutions. As time is moving too fast, so I'll quickly move on to another speaker. I would request Sulochana, Ramiah, Mohan ji to come forward. Perhaps begin what she just indicated, or you could provide your own case studies as well.
Right. It's so interesting to listen to the 2 speakers so far who have given a wide range of information and some very insightful messages about hate speech. So I'm being a journalist, I'm very narrowed down to my journalistic sphere, where I am very much stationed and thinking 24 hours on journalism terms. I've been in the field about almost 30 years. This hate speech, why do we always connect it with the minority? I always think like that. Why is it connected only to minorities? It's mainly because they are underrepresented. They don't have the voice to confront. They don't have that power, and they can be overpowered even if they want to confront them. That is why this whole hate speech became so dominant and very much in use on the minority communities. So again, when it comes to Sri Lanka, it has been a very tough time, challenging years of fight against this menace. It really aggravated at some point, which many of you know during which period. One thing that when it comes to talking about minority issues and hate speech, people have to be very careful as to what they use, the terms they use, how they voice about it, because you can be still trolled somewhere down the line. You may even not even know when. So having that in mind, I would like to say about the minorities, mainly in Sri Lanka, have been targeted. That's a clean sheet on that. Many people, if you take to the social media and type hate speech in Sri Lanka, you can see such a lot of comments about Sri Lanka overall, saying that it is a country that is racist. That has given a lot of prominence to the majority, easily identified by many of the people around the world, including the majority of people of this country who have identified that. this kind of a power, overpowering over the minority comes with some of the laws that are existing in the country. One is they're giving more prominent to the Buddhism. That is where things started to work negatively on the minorities. When you give priority to one religion over the other, you can see what not can happen. So, for instance, I would like to draw the attention recently. This is about the majority people, okay? The majority community, suddenly a very peaceful residential area, suddenly a lady donates a house to a Buddhist monk out of nowhere. And then they started practicing yoga or whatever, meditation. And the house is turned out to be a small Buddhist holy place. And the entire residential area is disturbed. And these are all basically from the same Buddhist community. But they don't accept this kind of sudden popping up a mushrooming Buddhist shrine or a religious place in their area where they are moving about, having their day-to-day life. So they cannot stop this either. Because in law in Sri Lanka, you cannot stop anyone creating a religious place or forming up a building. So this overpowered this monk who became so friendly with this lady teacher from the same community. She donates the house to this monk and he's living there with this woman and then building this temple. Nobody could do anything about it. The entire community, about 20 houses down that private road, they tried to go and complain to the police saying that disturbs their basically their status quo. They are living there. But the police refrained to take the complaint, mainly because Buddhism given the top priority in the country. So he didn't take down the complaint. They have nobody to talk to. They approached me, this whole residential area, they called, some of them known to me, called and said, can you write about it? Well, I cannot write about it too. Now you see how far this thing goes. So nobody can talk about it. But if similarly a mosque or a Hindu kovil comes up, you can see the tension, the commotion, and how they widely create such a disturbance, the police intervention, political intervention, and getting rid of that place or kind of cordon that area with all sort of barriers. Nobody should go there. So you can see that has happened very often in this country. So this is one solid example how this whole religious activities turn out to be a hate speech. Because once you start writing about it or hinting about it on social media, it becomes hate speech. Because the people who don't like the mosque, who don't like a church, who don't like a Hindu kovil, turn out the entire story, the agenda to be hate speech towards the minority communities, which is actually Hindu is a minority community, Christians are a minority community, Muslims are the minority community. But a similar thing when it happens to the majority, there is hardly any sort of hate speech, but they will promote and accuse those who are talking about it. They are called traitors, they are called anti-Sri Lankans. So this pattern had been going on for a while. And I, being a Sri Lankan journalist, I have seen that Sri Lanka is the religious and ethnic minority, including Tamil, Muslim, and Christians communities, frequently face challenges linked to hate speech, often fueled by underlying ethnic tension and political narratives. These are happening. Despite the end of the civil war in 2009, divisions between the Sinhalese majority and the Tamil Muslim minorities remain very, 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 very sensitive in this country. Sensitive in the sense you cannot raise your voice. There are a couple of, educated intellectuals and good civil society members who raise their voice, but they are powerless too. Their version of fighting this hate speech menace goes unheard very often. So the other now this particular incident of creating of a Buddhist temple went basically nothing has happened. This whole thing is going on, the practice of meditation and the monk speech and all that is going on completely without any disturbance. Also, very interestingly, another Buddhist young girl, who's a stand-up comedian. She's a very, very intelligent woman. She came up with the stand-up comedian, coming up with the status quo about Buddhism itself. She mocks at certain stories related to Buddhism, and she was arrested. Now, again, she is from the Buddhist community, and she's a young girl, educated, intellectual, but she said it in lighter vein. The entire thing was twisted. A video was circulated on social media, and there she goes to prison. She was almost for 7 months in prison. And this again is very interesting because we have this International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR. Law is there. Under this law, people can be taken. That's good in a way. Hate speech can be controlled. But again, there is no proper line drawn. Who is doing this hate speech? Whether it's hate speech or not is still not clear in this country. You don't know whether what you utter is hate speech or not. Because this girl, finally, she was acquitted from all the charges because her comedy or the stand-up comedy was not classified as hate speech, but she already spent 7 months in prison. So you can see the veracity of this law because you cannot actually um, uh, exactly say whether this is hate speech or not. So many people get away with it. When you can say hate speech, you still can get away with it. You can still be a hate speech and still be present. So you have no idea where do you stand on this. So the other one is, I'm talking about the gender-related hate speech. That is also on the rise. Women in politics in Sri Lanka is only 3% represented, all because of this hate speech surrounding women in this country. Actually, they don't like to go to politics. They don't want to enter the parliament. The fear they have created in this basically patriarchal society like Sri Lanka. This has really tormented women in even thinking of doing politics. They don't even want to talk about it. So this gender-related hate speech is also very wild. It goes on all the social media. You cannot come out with your own opinions about their sexual orientation, and you can see a lot of them saying a lot of ugly comments about her. The transgender, they are also highly discriminated, taken on social media, laughed at every photos. So there is no control on these matters, and they are all minority because they are powerless. They are minority because they are underrepresented. They are minority because they have no voice to stand by them. So that is one. And the other one is that in journalism, in media also, we have this lot of hate speech. They categorize you in different boxes. They put you in different boxes. Now, who is saying what is very important? The ethnicity background matters, not the value of the news. The ethnicity of the person matters. Now, for instance, my story is related to minorities. I'm coming from the minority Tamil community, and my stories related to minority communities are not very well accepted because I'm pro Tamil. That's how they look at it. They can tell me that you are funded by the Tamil diaspora easily because if I'm talking about human rights, about war criminals, and all those subjects that matters to the minority, when I talk, I am labeled. But the same matters, there are majority Sinhalese also talking about, but they are not labeled. So that's what I am having some issues. Sometimes I don't want to tweet my own stories because it doesn't well settle in some mind because I come from that community. But same thing if you talk another person does. They say he's very good, he's very neutral, he's unbiased, and all sort of. And they are invited for all these programs when I am not kind of welcomed because I identify myself more in that forum, and they don't like it also. The minority community, they feel that when I come and I say something, they will lose a point. But the same thing they want from the other community to address and write, well accepted. So this mindset is actually sort of very disturbing. Then the other thing I would like to talk about is the political influence. Now you can see it in the parliament. Over certain incidents, how they project it in the parliament. They all go after that particular member who is saying something that is not in their sense. It's not Sri Lankan. It's not Sri Lankan kind of a label. If you talk about things that matters only for the majority of the communities that would accept, that is news. If not, it's anti-Sri Lankan, anti whatever, all anti. So while saying that, I also have something about how the minorities have been uh, looked down upon at every turn. Like basically, if you take on to the social media or Twitter, I just saw so many comments about how government has arrested about the stand-up comedian for alleged disrespect towards Buddhism. Then there is one MP of the Tamil community who has said about how hardline monks who are flashing all this bad hate speech about the other communities not taken into custody, whereas the stand-up comedian has been taken into custody. So this monk is still doing what he's supposed to do. Totally hate speech. He's spreading all over the eastern province. He has a lot of goons with him. He tries on the people. He chases people. He hits the Catholic priest or whoever the pastor goes into that village. Why are you coming here? You are trying to convert the Buddhists. You are trying to do this. And so he has been really a nerve-wrecker. But he is not being taken into custody so far. Then the violence against the Muslim is one major point to be made here. I think many of you know about the cremation of the Muslim bodies during the COVID time, and I think I heard it's now crossed over 1,000 bodies were cremated, and nobody could stop it, all because of a wrong scientific what do you call analysis that was given to the government at that time, saying that when you bury COVID struck people, the germs will get into the sand and it will travel to the streams and you will be drinking polluted water. And usually the Buddhists are cremated, Christians and the Muslims are buried, Hindus and Buddhists are cremated. So the whole idea was the Christian had to cremate. They didn't have any problem because there are some Christians who do that on their own willingness. But for Muslims, it's part of their rights, their religious. That is the thing for them. It's very religious. Life itself is connected to their religion. So when you cremate it, had a lot of disturbance. Muslims were really upset, but it went on unstoppable. They have a strong political representation from the Muslims. The foreign minister was a Muslim, but he could not do anything. So how powerful that is. Including Imran Khan from Pakistan tweeted, "Hey, stop this! Don't cremate Muslims." That didn't get into their mind. So it went on overboard on this total control, having this power of religion. Things have gone very bad to Sri Lanka. But now, if I'm talking in the current context, things are getting better. I would like to highlight on many occasions. Basically, during elections, we always have hate speech part of it's a tradition. Over the political candidates get onto the stage, they attack all whom they don't like. But this time, after a long time, the last presidential election that was held last month, there was no hate speech, no community was dragged into it, and people are very, very vigilant. People are very cautious about it. They don't like this hate speech. You must know that 99% of the Sri Lankans are literate people. They have learned it bitter way. They knew that the communities are polarized because of politicians, not because of anyone else. People have understood that the same feeling that I have is the same feeling another person has. So when you start having any hate speech tweet, you have it. If you can be trolled, you can be basically picked out of nowhere, and even you will be seeing that police is coming to your house. So that is happening now. A very, very good understanding is that people have realized people's mindset is gradually changing because most of the devastation brought into this country, say the Easter Sunday attacks, the 30 years of war, it all came on this hatred towards another community. So people have learned it hard way, in bitter terms, so they don't want this to recur. So this recurrence has no room here, but still we are learning because it's only 21 million people. You can talk, you can actively, practically do something. The NGOs are very tough. The journalists have taken on a strong line not to promote any hate. That I am one of them, and I am also a media trainer. We are training the young journalists around the country. I have been involved in a training session for last 1 year, this whole year, and we are training the journalists how to avoid community-based stories in a very hatred manner, to remove names and tags and gender when it's not relevant. Don't use it. You use it in the news. You don't say a Tamil thief was caught. That's once upon a time also very practically used in our newspaper. Now you don't identify people with names or with any religion or saying the Buddhist monk. We won't say if he's a suspect, he's a suspect. We don't say a Buddhist monk suspect. We don't say a priest suspect. Okay, is it relevant? We would say, but we won't say which priest means. It can be Hindu, Buddhist, or Christian, or even a Muslim. So we will say priest, but we will not say the identity because we know these are very sensitive to these people. So on broader basis, we have all kind of redefined our status quo in this country, which is very important. If you don't do it, it's going to be a huge calamity because social media is so powerful. You cannot let anyone misuse the social media. Is one particularly people are very interested in Sri Lanka. It can be controlled, and they are controlling it. And we have come to some point where I see myself that this practice is going on very well. If I start not using community, identifying community, definitely another person will not know and he will not share. So it goes. So very responsible citizens to be created means you need to be aware of this, that how hate speech can undermine another society, underestimate another society. He will not get a chance to live a good life. All this goes, we don't know. Once you target a person, say something very bad, we don't know how his life is going to be thereafter. We are just saying something, we are typing something, that's it. But we don't know how it's going to impact his life. So now people have realized it, and Sri Lanka is actually working hard on those lines. But till today, I won't say it is being eradicated, it's going to be eradicated. There are people who are born with some sort of a hatred toward others, and they will continue. Only thing we are going to confront them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sulochana, for starting off with some unforgettable stories, right? And you have shown us some green lights of hope. In your talk, it can be said or it can be asserted that the power of dialogue means a lot. So if we talk to each other, if we interact with each other, then their solution will emerge. And you said that your country is changing; it's heading towards sanity. So you talked about the sensitization. So people are now very carefully using the words. We have another media trainer with us, Lubna Jerar. I'll get back to her. Lastly, because I would request now Bridhika to come forward because she has been actively involved in content generation or content creation through videos and through her activism. So we would like to hear her point of view and insights on this. I do have questions, but I mean, I did have questions initially, but I guess our honest, distinguished speakers have covered almost all the questions that I was going to ask. So I won't be asking too many questions. So that's why I'm, having to from Sri Lanka now Nepal. So Ritika, can you come forward and floor is all yours? Thank you.
Thank you, Furqan. Namaste and greetings to everyone. It's an absolute honor to be here. As Furqan rightly said, being the youngest also gives me a very intimidating feeling that you come from very good experiences, and the stories that I heard so far from Sri Lanka, from India, quite resonates with what's happening in Nepal. I mostly work in the activism, like Furqan said, and my background is advocating for Dalit rights, and a lot of majority of my work revolve around social media, working and advocating and creating campaigns that that promote and tries to share positive narrative stories on Dalit issues in Nepal. So my sharing and insights will be mostly on the minority communities, specifically Dalit communities in Nepal. Talking about the Dalit communities, for centuries, caste hierarchies have shaped our social, economic, and political life in Nepal, and leading to very much a lot of discrimination against Dalit communities. And despite we have a very strong constitution that protects and promotes anti-caste-based discrimination, but however, caste-based violence and prejudice remain very pervasive. And social media in recent times has made this prejudice worse, like spreading online hate speech against Dalits widely, and instances where anonymous accounts where they spread hateful messages, and there are a lot of memes that particularly mocks Dalit identities, and this digital platforms often turns into spaces that repeat and strengthen the caste-based discrimination that we experience here in Nepal. And I would like to bring some recent examples where caste-based discrimination on digital space was widely seen. Similar to India back in 2020, during the time of COVID, I think social media was a platform where a lot of people were able to share their thoughts and experiences because everything was restricted. And during that time, like two of the incident, one was when a Dalit journalist in Nepal became a target and an online hate after she publicly spoke about facing discrimination while renting a house in 2021. And she was targeted and humiliated, and social media platform saw a surge of hate comments, and with many users often attacking her caste, her identity. And here it was mostly her as a woman, where a gender also played a very big role, and also her caste as an identity as a Dalit woman. It really took a toll on social media platforms. And this was personally triggering to me myself, because coming from the Dalit community, and seeing people close to me writing mean things and hate status cornering the whole community was personally triggering at that time. And similarly, there was another incident where a Dalit young man, along with five of his friends, were brutally murdered in 2020 after being attacked by the family of his girlfriend when he went to meet her. And of course, she belonged to a privileged caste. And his brutal murder, of course, shocked the nation. But instead of sympathy, social media saw a wave of posts blaming this man for overstepping caste boundaries. And Dalits who spoke out against the injustices were often target of hate speech. And also some received death threats. And there was like casteist narratives that was portrayed him deserving for his faith due to social norms. This toxic discourse on social media, of course, reinforced the deep-seated caste-based prejudices that is still prevalent in the Nepalese society. And this two are just some examples. Apart from caste-based discrimination victims, it is often the activists or politicians or media personalities who belong to the Dalit community or an ally of anti-caste discrimination are in target to hate speech on social media. And this has this kind of situation have had a serious mental effect on people, and the psychological toll of such extreme levels sometimes affects young people, who seeks or wants to, desires for change. And this is a situation which cannot be overstated. And talking about social media as a platform, of course, it has both good and bad sides. But before stating more on what are the good aspects and the bad aspects, the accessibility of social media is the recent data published by Nepal Telecom in 2018 show that more than 58% of the population have internet access in Nepal. Of course, it is a rapid growth given the context of Nepal history and the internet that is easily available. But the Dalit representation is 14% of the 30 million population, and around 42% of the Dalit are below the poverty line. And given the circumstances, Dalits' access to internet or social media is very, very low. And their absence in digital space often makes them voiceless. And, their stories are usually undermined. And, even if there is a unity, it's overshadowed by the majority of the population. And of course, when you talk about accessibility, it's mostly the people in majority are the privileged caste. And, we could see the dominance that's taking over the social media spaces as well. And talking about, yet social media is a critical tool for resistance. Dalit youths have courageously spoken about the injustices that's happening through different platforms, social media platforms, whether it could be to share the narratives or mobilize or protest or simply raise an awareness issues. In 2020, I launched Dalit Lives Matter campaign in Nepal, and I was driven by frustration over Dalits just being portrayed solely as, poor and vulnerable population, and the lack of information on caste-based atrocities. So my goal was to bring solidarity and visibility to issues that's over the time it's often isolated or ignored by mainstream media. And this, this initiative helped to gain both national and international recognition. But over that, I think it was more important on highlighting the issues, what's actually happening to the Dalit communities in Nepal. And over the time, this started as just a movement, and now 4 years later is a collective platform, which is Dalit Lives Matter Global Alliance. So in a way, digital movements, and many more movements that's concurrently occurring have broken the silence and has created in uniting allies and amplifying Dalit voices in Nepal. And of course, worldwide too. But when we talk about, the regulations, how the country has managed social, in general, if we talk about the protective mechanisms, it was just last year in November, the cabinet in Nepal passed a social media management a directive, which was inclusive of 19 point of not to do list for the users of social media. And it included certain types of activities, prohibited certain types of activities like to share expressions or including words, audio, visuals, or photographs that propagate hatred and disrupt social harmony in terms of targeting a specific person, group, and caste, and other race, ethnicity, and etc. And also I did not allow to spread hatred targeting a person or age, particular age. So in a way, when you see, the regulations brought by the government is just last year, while the social media was in presence since early 2000s. So you see, we are already 2 decades behind when in terms of protecting, digital spaces in terms of particularly to the minority communities. But I however, feel, this is a good stepping stone. To regulate things. But however, there has been a lot of criticisms in terms of this bill. There has been wider criticism to the government on this bill from various groups stating and alleging that the government actually intent to introducing this bill was to just curtail the freedom of expression, which is of course guaranteed by the Constitution. And also as an opponent and as an act to protect those opponents who intend to bring changes in political system using social media platform at its will. Because in the recent election, we saw social media really change the government system. And if you see, the Bangladesh recently also experienced, the youths came together against the government. So government kind of felt this as a threat and, came up with this bill. So there has been a lot of comments and debates on this, if this bill is good or not. And similarly, with respect to positive, this step is kind of positive because it kind of protects and promotes the privacy of the people, and has been also implemented and replicated in other jurisdictions, and other we hope that there will be more and more regulation that strictly binds this hate speech that's majorly targeted to the minority population. And I feel to effectively combat such hate speech, social media, to protect the social media platforms, I think multifaceted approaches are required. There should be good policies and regulatory frameworks that must be established. And it could be inclusive of, also acts such as holding social media companies more accountable, because in terms of Nepal, there are no companies that are social media companies that are formally registered in Nepal. So it makes it even more difficult to when they're to hold them accountable. So recently, just a month ago, TikTok is now registered in Nepal only because it was banned a year ago. So now they have a company here. So now this bill also promotes that at least a representative or the company needs to be registered for it to be accessible to all the people for the youth living in the country. So I think that will also kind of help to protect the hate speeches that's going. But again, as rightly said by previous speakers, I think that it's more important for people to be more conscious of their actions rather than just having this acts or regulatory policies. I think it's the genuine efforts from people that needs to be understand that how it affects the minority communities overall. And I think there also needs to be collaboration with civil society organization to ensure that ensure effective solutions that reflects the actual lived realities of the minority communities. And I think there needs to be community based initiative, which is very, very essential in protecting the minority communities, that will be empowering people from marginalized backgrounds to challenge and report hate speech, and which is very much important. The first step is the people from minority communities, they do not realize that there is a certain course of action that can be taken. So I think civil society organization and through this community driven initiatives, it's important that we inform people on the these are the mechanisms in order to report hate speech, and there is actually steps that we can report and make the perpetrators accountable of their actions. And I think another vital strategy is also promoting digital literacy is really, really important. Of course, the education among the minority communities, particularly when I'm referring to the Dalit community, is very, very low. So in terms of that, teaching users to also, as I mentioned, recognize, report, and how to counter this online abuse with resilience and dismantle hate narratives and foster digital empathy, I think is also, more we talk about it, I think we will come towards more oriented and that this kind of discrimination, which was a very visible form of discrimination when we talk about caste-based discrimination, but now recently when we talk about it has gone to invisible forms, and digital platform is something that's that is not something that you can just catch and pinpoint at certain people at at any given time. So I think it's important to recognize and dismantle such structures that perpetuates hate and forge a more equitable and empathetic world that's really, really important. Yeah, thank you
so much, Bridhika, for your wonderful thoughts and suggestions. Talk about collaboration. I'm also a bigger proponent of having minority rights council similar to the Human Rights Council, because Human Rights Council it works at a larger ambit. It covers almost all of the issues pertaining to human rights violations, but often there have been cases that issues pertaining to minority groups have been neglected many a time. So the stronger message for collaboration is coming from Nepal. So my last speaker, who has been patiently waiting for a long time, from Pakistan, Lubna. She's a media trainer and a senior journalist who has trained a lot of journalists in issues like disinformation, misinformation, and women who are at the receiving ends, in digital spaces. So I would like to request her to take the floor and perhaps conclude the session.
Thank you so much. It's really great to hear all the speakers, and I think whatever I've heard so far, it's reflected in Pakistan as well. Hate speech is something that we are tackling all the time. One minority that I think, which is not a minority per se, but women and transgenders are targeted a lot in our country because of the patriarchal and this social structure. IFJ comes in because I am working with the IFJ right now. I'm a gender coordinator in Pakistan, and I also monitor South Asia for media rights and any violations against the media. So we often see that hate, as we see, is a very lucrative product, as our first speaker said. It's very easy to spread hate, and through this magnified platform, which social media I think has more impact than anything we've ever seen. We in Pakistan have seen a lot of cases, one recently about a Muslim doctor who was lynched because he was accused of blasphemy, and the viral element of social media is very scary to see. As a journalist and monitoring the region, I think we need to look towards solutions. I think we all know the problems. What we can do is, like, Pakistan has a lot of laws, but until and unless they are implemented and they are not followed by the, let's say, the ruling elite. They need to actually stop using social media and hate speech and religion and other ethnic issues to propagate their message. It doesn't seem to affect them at all that this trickles down to dangerous incidents and violent incidents across the country. We also do know that, as we all know, that online content always translates into physical and real world and vice versa. So we need to actually stop only making statements and actually take action. Like I have seen that Dalit Lives Matter is something that we need to understand and learn from and work towards to actually achieve the goals of protecting people online. Women in Pakistan, and especially journalists, are the targets of almost hate speech here. They even went to the National Assembly's Standing Committee for Human Rights, and they did tell the committee that we are constantly abused. We are abused and harassed online, and at that time, unfortunately, it was a political party that was using social media's power to silence people, especially women journalists who were critical of them. So I think we need to understand the power, use it in our favor, and as journalists, activists, academics, I think we need to spread more positive news out there. I know hate sells and it goes viral faster than any other content that we can put out there, but we need to keep stopping that by putting out more positive and proper factual content out there. We need to counter this narrative online. Last thing I want to say, with IFJ, we are constantly working against hate speech because we see most of the hate speech cases, they translate into violence and even loss of lives of our colleagues. And journalists are usually most top of the line targeted people in many societies, especially like mine, where we are not allowed maybe to speak out openly or in this region. So I think we should move towards solutions, and our organization is always working, and we'd love to work with the region and other activists and academics in the region, and with organizations like SARIM, who are actually understanding how dangerous this social media can be if you use it wrongly. And most of the people use the power of that to amplify their hate and their messages. We've seen that in the recent elections in the region. Even in America, we saw that recently. So we know the problems. I think we should go towards solutions, and IFJ would be happy to work with anybody who wants to extend trainings or have trainings for media, naturally, because we do know media plays a big role in our region and across the world. So because there's been so much talk, and times I see the clock is ticking, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much, Furqan, for connecting me with such amazing people and speakers.
Thank you so much, Lubna, for your final thoughts, and the issues that you highlighted somehow resonates with all the other speakers have spoken about, beginning from Fernand, who have categorically hinted towards the report that he produced, which is basically still there. It's all about implementation. Sulochana also talked about the lesser representation of women in politics that hinders them for their participation to openly talk about what the issues they are facing. Bridhika's Dalit Lives Matter has always been inspirational as a digital movements organization. She has given some wonderful stats regarding the lack of access that Dalit communities have in Nepal for internet. So that is basically hindering them to be vocal about their issues. So on this very note, the purpose of this course was to first highlight the issues and then moving towards the solution part of it. So we have extracted a lot of solutions. There has to be actionable policies, action taken to be care of. Perhaps there has to be legally binding action that needs to be adopted. Okay, I would also request all of the distinguished speakers for their final thoughts or any message for our organization, the work that we are doing. I'll start off with Lubna because she might switch off quickly.
I think that we should, as I said before, go towards solutions. And we have, I think, from most of the speeches of our speakers, I think we've got a lot of positive information from them as well, despite the fact that we've been talking about the incidents and unfortunate things that have been happening in the region. We need to maybe come into a regional kind of we should make a group, or maybe if you can't make a group or, a network, maybe you can have a WhatsApp group, which is a very South Asian thing. And maybe we can, discuss our problems and solutions and see what has worked for one particular country. And that could be implemented here, because the South Asians, I think, have very, very similar issues. somewhere only the religions or the ethnicities change, but we face the same issues, same patriarchy, same kind of certain conservative traditions and customs. So I think this is a treasure of speakers and minds in this region that can be put together. And I'm sure maybe not ended. Naturally, hate speech is something that has been going on forever. I mean, social media has only put wings to it because of its magnitude and impact. But I'm sure we can at least put a stop to it. And I'm sure, and anybody I talk to from this region, and I get to meet many people, nobody wants to hate somebody. Nobody wants to be, we want peace in our own region. You may not, like Indian ourselves, we may not like to be, have certain issues. I don't think we hate each other. I think we welcome the people who come to Pakistan from India and vice versa. And people-to-people contact needs to be increased. Social media has allowed that without, because visas are a problem. Maybe we can just have social media gatherings like this. Just, unofficial gatherings where we can discuss issues. Journalists can talk to journalists, academics, anybody, activists, and increase. I think Veena Sarwar, one of the journalists that used to be in Pakistan, she is doing that. And a lot of people are doing that. But I think SARIM can also do that being in Pakistan, you're based in Pakistan or the region. And that would be, I think, I'm sure my speakers may agree. I think this is the way to go.
Thank you so much, Bridhika.
I think I resonate with what Lubna said. I think young people like me, I think there is a lot of things that's been done and said already, and a lot of approaches has worked and not has worked. So it could be a good platform where people who are mostly in the activism or are working on the digital space, like myself, I work a lot in the digital space. So sometimes it gets very very tiring, when advocating for certain issues or topic itself, it gets very tiring. So I think it's a good opportunity to create a platform where where we can come together and learn from each other's experiences. Having said that, I think I had a wonderful time learning what's happening in the neighboring countries. I've been to all of the countries we had panel from, except for Canada and Pakistan, which I'm yet to explore. But it was good to hear you all and learn from the experiences. And I think we all are in this together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sulochana.
Basically, what I wanted to say is that hate speeches trigger hate speeches. If I say something hateful, then definitely there'll be 10 people to talk hatefully, So where do we stop? We have to find the cornerstone where you can start from and end. I mean, as journalists, we have a lot of opportunities. I'm telling you, compared to the others. Journalists or media personalities have a lot more strength and have the responsibility, has those influences, have the connectivity that we should make use of. I think I am very much involved in a little collaborative journalism. But we can extend live platform where we can sort of control the social media in somewhat with a positive note. And we in South Asia almost all of us have the same mentality, same mindset. So easy, and hate speech is all over the world. So it's one point, and same mentality and mindset of people with same mindset can really achieve some goal. So that it doesn't spread. What happens in Pakistan has an impact in Sri Lanka. What happens in Sri Lanka has an impact in India. So this interdependency is there always in South Asia. It has some sort of an impact to each other's soil. So how do we connect? We can connect, and I think, like others said, we can have a WhatsApp group and also see for other platforms where we can join and personally, physically be present and talk over. I mean, this needs dialogue, and without dialogue or communication, you cannot achieve a lot. So this connectivity, connections, and interdependency, all these good words must put to maximum into practice. So I hope we will we'll just not have this forum for the sake of talking and giving your views, because all the views are almost same. There can't be anything unusual. So the next step would be where we can physically meet. We can create a forum, a platform for these digital issues where we can confront in a different style. Probably we have some other new manifesto, a worksheet, or a white paper where we can ponder and sort of bring some sort of a communication and represent ourselves better.
Thank you so much.
Can I
sure.
just ask a question to Sulochana? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Sulochana, your speech was really very, very, what should I say, intriguing, in the sense that you talked about the kind of intolerance that you're experiencing in Sri Lanka, and then you talked about the fact that you are not being able to manage the hate speeches well. How is that happening? Can we learn some lessons and try to do it in our immediate surroundings?
I think, first of all, as a person from the media, I kind of have this ability to confront somebody is having a wrong impression, a wrong ideology, or something very, very harmful, harsh remarks. I immediately find it. I always confront them right there on social media. I do that with facts, not my opinion. Sometimes my opinion, but with facts. Second thing is we don't promote on media in Sri Lanka anything that will be harmful to others. If I take that stance and 10 others take the same stance, we have almost stopped something from happening. So that knowledge plus my own initiative, what can I do, which is very important. So if I can do something, definitely the other person can do something about it. I mean, we share this knowledge. And I told you, this country is only 21 million. It's an island. We don't have borders. So we don't have any issues of other minorities coming into our country or some problem, our own ethnic problems we have. So we can tackle it. So people are learning. I mean, when I have a right approach, definitely two people who approach me will have the same idea. That's what I think. So overall, the impact of hate speech has impacted everybody, not only the minorities, the majorities also. Everybody has been impacted. I mean, all are not bad, born bad. I mean, at some point they get carried away with these impressions on social media. You can control those things. Even I control myself. Once upon a time, I was also a little harsh, not saint. I have been kind of very harsh as well. If somebody says something very rude, I'm there to confront it rudely. But now I don't do that. Where's this self-censor yourself? Self-censorship is very necessary. I mean, you don't have to have your opinion, in a ruckus opinion, to put out there and upset many people. So I have self-censored. I've learned to self-censor my emotions upon these things. We don't tend to, especially the English media, we don't tend to create any kind of hate speech. We don't promote, we don't retweet. They have taken it on us that if I do, it will, at least 10 people will read it. So if my followers are 5,000, if I retweet, 5,000 might see it. That's bad. So that responsibility, collective responsibility, and that awareness is in us. Very lately, we have picked this very lately. I think even young politicians are not doing that. There was always a minority targeted speeches on the stage about ethnicity, about religion. This presidential election, not one candidate spoke like that. Amazing. There were few, but irrelevant. We don't want to identify them. But the main candidates, main political parties never used that. So I see a lot of improvement in thinking or mindset to change. It takes some time, and it has changed. So we are very happy about it. So things, when you social media, if you don't use it in a way that would create a harmonious society, you will know whether you are the one who created it or not. So you can easily identify.
Yeah, yes. Thank you so much, Sulochana. First of all, apologies for extension of time, because I didn't want any of speaker to stop there, because it was all informative. It was all refreshing to hear the knowledge coming from our esteemed panelists. So on this very note, I would like to say we would come up with a different episode of webinar with a different issue. So it was a pleasure having you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.